Now, to continue with our book reviews, I think this week is something a little bit different, but very, very important. We've talked about art as painting, sculpture, and textile. Murals, of course, come under painting. Now, we have actually a fourth, which we don't talk about as often, but which is very, very important, and it's actually architecture. I mean, we often hear the terms art and architecture going together. So today we're going to look at a book called Sacred Sites, the Buddhist Monastery. And it's by a fellow named M. Rajesh, and I don't really know him, so I can't comment. And also by a fellow named Thomas Kelly. Thomas Kelly is a very well-known, famous photographer all over Asia, all over the world. And this book is by the two, Rajesh and Kelly. Now, you would think that there would be more publications about Buddhist monasteries around the world, but actually for Himalayan art, there's very few. Probably, I don't even know if we can count a half dozen. But this book looks like a thin, not overly large publication. It has a good footprint, but it's not overly thick. And you'd think that it's probably just for a coffee table, but it's not. It's actually an indispensable book, especially if you're from a novice to an experienced, to a professional academic interested in Himalayan art and site locations and monasteries and temples. This book is really a gem. It's a jewel. And if you can't own it, then you must at least have access to it somewhere and have looked through it to know that it is a book that you can go to find out important information related to monasteries, the occupants of the monastery, where they're located, what they generally look like, what kind of architecture you have from Ladakh, northern India, Spiti, and then we have architecture into Bhutan and Tibet and Mongolia and northern China. But this book doesn't go into all of those areas so much. It is really specializing in northern India, and it is really a gem. Now, in terms of contents, it has a foreword, of course. Then it has the first chapter is Origin of the Sangha. The Sangha are the Buddhist congregation that live in monasteries. Then the next is the Gompa. Gompa is a Tibetan word for monastery. It's Gompa, community and patronage. Monasteries can't exist unless there's suitably large villages nearby to support the monks. Then we have Gompa, art and architecture. Again, we have art and architecture here, very important. After that, we have organization of the Gompa, how it's structured, who's in charge, how do things get done, how do you divide religious practice from secular practice and just cooking and cleaning. Then you have Gompa and education. Now, when you have younger monks, how do you educate them? What is the curriculum? What are the books? Then finally, we have a whole chapter on famous monasteries of Ladakh in northern India. And this is indispensable because this is giving you a real overview of all the most important, most famous monasteries of the region. And some of them are very old. They go back to the 11th, 12th, 13th century with their murals intact. And this is very important for art, for the study of art. So I really do recommend that you don't have to buy the book. You don't necessarily have to open it and look at it. But what's important here is you need to know that this book exists, because when you do want to learn something about the subject of Buddhist monasteries, this is the book. This is the go-to book. So we'll leave it there. You can press like, you can subscribe, you can join HAR on Patreon, and on Patreon we have free videos, which are longer than ones on YouTube and Instagram, but also we have free videos, but also we have members videos, which can be much longer and in much more detail on both art and on religious context and iconography. So we'll leave it there.